I'm Steve Wilkerson, and I'm with Jim Saunders, Executive Editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, Senator Joe Negron pulled a surprise on people, caused a lot of reaction when he announced last week that he wouldn't hear legislation allowing undocumented students to receive in-state tuition rates in colleges and universities, a priority of Speaker Weatherford's. What were some of the reactions?
Well, this has been one of the most interesting issues of the session throughout, the past several weeks, how this is going to play out. All of a sudden, Thursday afternoon, before the holiday weekend, Senator Negron puts out a statement, says he's not hearing the bill. And that goes along with what Senate President Don Gates has been saying all along, that Don Gates didn't like the bill, but he had not said he was going to pull the plug on it. This has created a ton of reaction. Probably most notable, which is very unusual, is that Governor Scott, former Governor Jeb Bush, and former Governor Bob Martinez put out a statement on Friday, Good Friday, saying, the Senate needs to take this issue up, that it should not be, buried, if you will, in committee, and that the Senate really should take it up. Very unusual to see the governors, the former governors, as well as the current governor do that. Also, it was probably the most clear statement Governor Scott has made so far in support of this bill.
It shows the power of a chairman, that they can halt a bill from ever getting heard in committee and thereby ever getting heard. And many people saw the hand of Senate President Gates in this activity.
Senate President Gates has made clear for weeks that he does not like this bill. He says that his constituents in Northwest Florida, he's from Niceville, and he says his constituents don't think it's fair that undocumented immigrant students should be able to get in-state tuition. That it's just not, that there's not support in his area of the state for this. It's sort of interesting. Senator Jack Latvala is the sponsor of the bill. He is a Republican from Clearwater, and he has 21 votes lined up, he says, and he's got himself and 20 co-sponsors. And he says that if he can get it to the floor, it's going to pass. But by Negron holding it up, like you said, he's a powerful committee chairman. He's also very close to Gates. By him holding it up, it may never make it to the floor. Also just going back to the whole issue of Senator Gates and Northwest Florida not supporting this issue, if you look at the co-sponsors of that bill, there are none among the Republicans, no Republican co-sponsors north of the I-4 corridor. Mm. So if you look at the very conservative, or relatively conservative parts of the state that are a base of the Republican Party runs up huge margins in North Florida. The Republican senators do not support it in that region.
Interesting. A big question, Jim, relating to the budget is where the issue of tax cuts, we knew that would be a big issue. The House and the Senate have differing views, but where is this going to end up? What are the differences and that stand out to you, and what are you looking for?
Well, Governor Scott put down a number at the beginning of the session, and really the leadership supports him on it, to make $500 million in tax and fee cuts this session. It's election year, great thing to campaign on. And, they've gotten almost $400 million of it out of the way because they've decided to cut vehicle registration fees that were increased in 2009. But that leaves like $100 million, probably a little bit more than that, to play with as they negotiate the budget. And the House and Senate have taken very different positions. The House has a bill that's sort of full of sales tax holidays. The House and Senate agree on these back-to-school sales tax holidays, which we've had for years and years, since Dan Webster, I think, was the one who started that years ago when he was in the legislature. And so they're kind of in agreement on that, but it's the other parts of the package that are different. The House has a sales tax holiday for hurricane supplies. My favorite is a sales tax holiday on gym memberships. There's things like that that they want to go in that direction. The Senate is more focused. In addition to the back-to-school sales tax holiday, they want to cut the communication services tax, which is important to your industry as well as basically there's taxes that are on cable bills and telephone bills or wireless bills. So they want to trim that. They say it's a broad-based tax cut that would affect a large number of residents. The other sort of interesting thing in the Senate package is that they also want to provide some money for the Daytona International Speedway, $2 million a year. I'm not exactly sure how they say that's a tax cut, but Daytona International Speedway is doing a big renovation project down there, and they want to have some money go down there. The chair of the Senate Finance and Tax Committee is Dorothy Huckel, who's from Port Orange, which if you leave the Speedway and drive about 10 or 15 minutes south, you'll be in Port Orange. So,
Well, they say, Jim, that a budget is a statement of battles won and lost. We'll see what happens. Another budget issue. Senator John Thrasher, a former speaker and the powerful rules chairman of the Senate, is advocating that Florida State University and Florida A&M University have separate engineering schools. They are now combined. This has created a lot of controversy. The Black Legislative Conference caucus is opposed to this adamantly. Where's this going? How will this work out?
In the whole scheme of a $75 billion budget, this is not a huge issue. I mean, it's $13 million we're talking about. So, it's kind of a rounding error in terms of that budget. But this issue has a ton of symbolic meaning. It also has some real world meaning for Florida State. John Thrasher is one of the biggest boosters of Florida State University in the legislature, has been for years. He wants to break off the engineering school. It is going to be one of the biggest, probably the most controversial issues to watch during this budget debate. It's all wrapped up in the budget. He's put $13 million into the budget. It kind of caught a lot of people by surprise during a Senate budget debate on the floor. From a FAMU's perspective, they have a lot of historical views on this issue and fears, really. I mean, they go back to in the late 60s, the legislature shut down the FAMU Law School at the time and moved it to Florida State. They're worried that this is going to do a lot of damage to FAMU, and that potentially, if there's not money put there for FAMU in the future, that its engineering school, if they were to separate, could go away or not be a good school. So it is a very emotional, controversial issue that's going to play out during the budget negotiations.
Okay, and finally, something that happened just before we went on into the studio today, the United States Supreme Court refused to take up an appeal of the 11th Circuit's decision blocking widespread drug testing of Florida State employees, which Governor Scott has been seeking. What happens next?
Well, I'm not sure from a legal perspective that there's anywhere he can go on the widespread testing. There is, basically what's happened is that Governor Scott came into office in 2011, wanted to, and made a big pitch to drug test state employees. He was challenged by the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, which is a big union, as well as the ACLU. And their argument is, this isn't the private sector, this is government. And government can't do suspicionless drug testing on a wide scale. There's always some safety-sensitive positions where it is possible to do that. And, the governor has pretty much lost at every round legally. He lost the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, Federal Appeals Court in Atlanta, took that to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided, as you said, they're not going to hear it. There is another legal chapter of this, though, and that is that the 11th Circuit said that basically you can drug test people, but you have to go through category by category to determine whether it is applicable and necessary. So they're going to go back to a federal district court and litigate over different categories of employees to whether he can drug test them or not, which is probably going to lead to a ton more litigation. I mean, do you need to drug test the clerk at the Department of Revenue, or do you need to drug test the guy who drives a big truck for the DOT? I mean, it's going to come down to job categories like that. But his attempt to do an across-the-board sort of drug testing program looks like it's dead now.
Thank you, Jim. For more news about Florida politics and government, visit the Advances section of our website.